Hello, fellow parents and educators. Thank you for joining me at Education Evolution, where we are disrupting the status quo in today's learning models. We talk about present-day education, what's broken, who's fixing it, and how. I'm Dr. Maureen O'Shaughnessy, your host and founder of Education Evolution and the Microschool Coalition, where we are fiercely committed to changing the narrative, to reimagining the education landscape and creating learning that serves all children and prepares them to thrive. Hi, Traci. It is so good to have you here.
Hi, it's so great to be here, Maureen. Thank you.
Yay! Listeners, today I'm chatting with Traci Baxley. She's the creator of social justice parenting, but that's not all. She wears many other hats. She's a belonging advocate, a cultural coach for transracial families. She consults for corporations. She's a university prof and teaches courses in curriculum, diversity, and multicultural education. And my favorite, she is the mother of 5 beautiful biracial children. And I can't wait for her to share with you some of her insights and experiences. Ready, Traci?
I am ready. Thank you.
Yay! First, would you please start by telling us about social justice parenting?
Yes, social justice parenting kind of came about, I guess, like you're saying, all these different hats that I wear is really a combination of my years in education and the way that I taught my own students when I taught in elementary school. And then the way that I taught once I went into higher ed, I teach in a teacher education program. So it was like the way that I wanted my teachers to come out of that program to be teachers, with this idea of being compassionate and being empathetic and being a really kind of a teacher who really got to know who their children were, their students were. And then, my life experiences being a mom, like you mentioned earlier, I do have 5 children, and what I learned from raising my children, who are all very different with different issues and different gifts. And I just kind of created this way of maybe parenting, because I've had some things that came up in my children's childhood that I felt like it was very fear-based parenting. And it stopped me from growing and being open to allowing my kids to grow. And so when I was able to kind of recognize that and stop doing that, parenting from that fear, it was kind of an aha moment that I often saw that in parents of students that I had, and also with friends. And so that's kind of how social justice parenting came about, through my experiences as a teacher and as a mom, and through, life experiences, of course.
Yes, I love that. I think you and I share a background in elementary education, and I love that that's how I got my start too, because we get to look at the whole child, and kindness and being humane. Those things are a part of being an elementary teacher, where I think sometimes older grades, it's more about the content area. So I think you bring something special from that background, as well as the parent piece really does. For me, it humbles me. And so I think that's amazing. I'd love to have you talk about your TEDx talk, where you would explain the ROCKS, ROCKS model, because I think that you have a system in place that takes it from an idea to action, and I want our listeners to hear about it.
Yes. So my TED Talk was centered around this idea of social justice parenting. And you don't have to be a parent to really engage in social justice parenting. It's if you have children in your life, whether it's as a teacher, as an aunt, as a grandmother, you really can practice and be intentional about the way you interact with those children in your life. So the social justice parenting is looking at the way we show up in 3 different ways, 3 different levels, or 3 different lenses. So it's the self. So a lot of self-reflecting and how this looks for us. The second level, or the second lens, is for your children or your family. So those people that are close to you, that you love. And then the third lens is that of a community member or a member of the world, a global lens. So it's self, family, and then community.
Got
So then
it.
there are the rocks. So the R is reflection. So it's about looking at your own experiences, your own knowledge, your own values, where they came from, how they impact the way you kind of navigate in the world, and how you parent and how you treat others. So what was it in your life that caused you to feel a certain way about a group of people, or things that if your parent taught you about giving or doing certain things you did in your family that you love and that have become a part of you. Those are the things that we want to be intentional about keeping, but also being intentional about the things that we want to let go, to change, or to do things differently, or to be just a better human being. So that's the R. The O is open dialogue. So this is about having those hard, open, honest conversations with ourselves, about our own lives, and
Mm-hmm.
also with our children. Children ask us questions that we don't always know the answer to. And sometimes we are afraid to kind of open that can of worms because we don't know what to say or how to say it. But in asking those hard questions, we began to become more in tune with our kids, and it opens us up to being more informed ourselves. And I think right now our country is in an awakening state where we're asking hard questions of our country.
Yes.
Yes. So that's all part of the reflection. And then the C is for compassion. And so that starts off with self-compassion, especially as women. We often, have negative self-talk, or that if somebody gives us compliments, we sometimes kind of brush it off, or change the
Right.
conversation, right? So it's about learning how to be more self-compassionate and modeling that for our children, and then teaching our children how to show compassion for other people. And then the K is for kindness. So this is how I see compassion put into an action. So what does that look like? What does that look
Ah,
like for yourself? What little things are you doing for yourself for self-care, Because if we're not good, it's hard to be the best for a parent or the best spouse or partner or teacher. And then, so how are you spreading kindness to your family? And then how is your family spreading kindness into the world? And it can be little things. Like I know a lot of times when we're in drive-thrus, we do it a lot at Starbucks. We will pay for the person behind us, or we will leave money at the grocery store cashier to help pay the bill for the person whose card is behind us in line, So it doesn't have to be a lot of things. It could be little things. My kids, when my older two, when they were younger, they got into, they start seeing a lot of homeless people in our, on the street going to the grocery store or on the bus going to school, and started getting very curious about that. And so they were very thoughtful in making sure when we left the house that we had snacks and stuff in the car, so that if we passed somebody, we had something to give. So this idea of building this habit of kindness for our kids and
yes.
yeah, it's so important, right? And then the S is for social engagement. So, how are you tapping into your gifts that you have that you can share with the world? How are you teaching your children to find the things that they're passionate about to make a difference, whether it's self-advocacy or it's, advocating or being in allyship with other people. I mean, that could be the environment, whatever that is that your family is passionate about, and making sure that you take that outside into the world. So those are the rocks. So that's kind of the foundation of social justice parenting, and looking at it from those three different lenses.
Love the comprehensiveness and that definition of compassion can become action when we do kindness. I think that it's very comprehensive, and the three different levels, ourself, our community, and globally, it seems like that you have really covered all the bases with your model. I also love that you're talking about this is not just for parents. So
Yes.
help expand, what might social engagement look like in schools beyond the isolated service projects that most of us squeeze in to our extracurriculars? If you were envisioning, how could it be bigger and more intentional in schools?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that could be built into curriculums. I think about teaching and parenting. Really, they both are like places where activism is a natural fit, really. And defining activism obviously is very different, but it's activism for me is just making any small changes that will impact somebody else or yourself, right? And so I think teachers really have a real great position to be able to do that. And I think it can go really in the content that we teach. There's a way to supplement these basic characteristics without like having, I get so frustrated when I see schools having like the value of the week. Like today we're going to talk about kindness and we're going to do that this
Yes.
week. And so I think building these things into our everyday practices as teachers is very important. And I think we have to teach kids that social action is not just something that you do to people and move on, right? It's something that we build into our daily practices, and it's something that's ongoing. And so I think sometimes when we do these service learning projects, we think of it almost like a checklist of something that's being a do-gooder.
Yep.
But really, this idea about social justice is about the practice of it every day. What little thing am I doing every day that leads to a person who develops these habits over time?
Yes, I think it is. It's definitely a marathon and not a sprint.
Yes, for sure. Yes. I think we should think about, as teachers, what activism looks like for them. And I kind of touched on this, but it's about what you can do in your own spaces at school too, right? It's letter writing. It's about, not just like the walks that we do with like, special groups or, like for a cause, but they're the little everyday practices. You don't have to wait for a special event to come up, but it's just building that into your everyday language at school and your everyday practices.
I think that's really important that teachers model it on the small daily basis and not, like you say, the big one-off events. That's a great recommendation.
Yeah.
So, Traci, this next question is kind of a tough one. In the wake of so many Black and people of color deaths at the hands of our criminal justice system, it seems like the country is finally shouting enough and looking to change policies and make systems truly address equality. And I'm seeing this in Seattle. It's shaking the foundation of our Seattle
Yes.
institutions,
Amazing.
challenging us to deal with our own biases, our lack of understanding. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we can create this change needed to be a more humane country. You're in the opposite corner of continental US. What are you feeling?
Yes, I'm feeling the same. I am holding on to hope and joy, right? That
Yes.
obviously we're seeing changes that we haven't seen since the 50s and 60s right now. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping, and that's kind of the space I'm living in right now, is to keep reminding people, mostly white allies, that
Mm-hmm.
the work is not done and that we have to stay vigilant about making these changes permanent. And so what I would say to people who are feeling that change is to not let up, because the systemic issues on race and equity is deep. I mean, obviously it goes back to the beginning of our country. It's kind of what our country was built on. And so, 1 month in time is not going to change those things, but that if everybody does a little bit every day, we can really start making inroads and permanent changes that we need for more equity in our country.
Absolutely. This is truly that marathon and not sprint perspective. I completely agree.
Yes, for sure.
I have one last question. I am handing you our education evolution magic wand. What would you wish for our parents and educators to commit to as intentional steps so that we foster youth who create a more humane world?
I am going to answer that question based on where we are right now in our
Yeah.
history, in our country, that I think it's very important that we see each other and that we accept everybody's lived experiences as truth for them, and that we're open. And I call it, living in this state of radical love, like really being in a place of radical love, which is about being open and to see the humanity in everybody and not close off, actively listening. And, radical love is about action and peace and this unconditional love where we're learning from each other. So I would say to see each other, to hear each other's perspectives, to look to see what you can gain and learn from each other and not hold on to stereotyping or a judgment of what we think we know or seeing the world only from our own perspectives, and being okay with asking questions, even if you don't get the answers that you want or that you need. And I'm also often talking to a lot of white moms right now who are afraid and feel paralyzed and trying to figure out how to help. And I always say, being comfortable with being uncomfortable is a great place to start, because at least you're doing the right thing and you're moving. So keep moving forward, keep asking questions, keep seeing each other, and really being respectful of each other's lived experiences.
That is so wise. I love the whole idea of radical love, active listening, and being okay with being uncomfortable as we ask questions and are curious and are growing. I think you've hit on it. And I like also that you said the word peaceful, that we can focus on making sure we're peaceful as we do this.
Yes.
Yes. No more violence, please.
Yes. We can be very loud and active without violence, for sure. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's the moms in both of us. We don't want any more people hurt.
That's for sure. Yes.
Yeah. Traci, thank you. You have so much wisdom, and I appreciate you sharing it in your social justice parenting and with my listeners. And I can't wait for that book that you're working on to come out so that we can celebrate that with you too.
Yes. Thank you, Maureen. I think you and I have so much in common, so I feel very honored to be here on your podcast. This has been awesome.
Thank you, Traci. Traci's social justice parenting model checks off all of the boxes and gives us lots of great ideas. I am just going to unpack a little bit more the whole concept of activism. In the show notes, I have a blog about mental health and activism, and it really connects that we're aware of the problems that need our attention, whether it's local, global, poverty, injustice, health. We know this, and it calls on us to really get specific about dealing with the issue of power and all of us taking ownership of our own power. The blog also cautions us from not having a narrow definition of activism and reminds us that we're all active in some way to create or sustain the systems we have in our lives. So 4 different things we can be thinking about is how are we active in terms of supporting systems, opposing systems, actively building and organizing for alternative versions. And the 4th way, sadly, reflects perhaps a silent majority who shows their activeness by maintaining the status quo, doing nothing, abdicating their power to others. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure our youth feel connected and see that their actions have meaning and purpose. I tuned into Jan Phillips' podcast. It's called Musecast, and it's in the show notes too, just to get a sense of how can we focus on causes and how can we become a force of change. And she talks about asking ourselves what is our heart's deepest desire, or what do we really enjoy doing? And also what is breaking our heart. Where those 2 responses intersect is where we are called to serve. And she says that some acts may be a way through a situation while others might change the situation, and that we need both. So we need to feed the homeless while we're working on ways to change the problem of homelessness. Also, the Anti-Defamation League, ADL, has a great blog for educators with 10 ways youth can engage in activism. And that link is also in our show notes. In the words of former President Obama, when told that pushing for the Affordable Care Act could hurt his chance for re-election, he said, "They've argued now is not the time for reform. It's going to hurt your poll numbers. How is it going to affect Democrats in November? Don't do it now." He responded, "My question to them is, when is the right time? If not now, when? If not us, who?" Those are good questions for us to ask ourselves. Let's model updating policies and institutions. And let's help our youth become involved. The ROCKS model that Traci explained is a great way to form habits for change. Creating an equal world where all are seen, heard, valued, and thriving is up to all of us. If you're finding yourself thinking, I need to do this in my school, let's talk about it. Earlier this year, I got to present models for diverse learners for the South American Inclusion School of 2020 conference. There are many ways to enhance the holistic support of our learners. Let's create an action plan together. Visit educationevolution.org/consult to book a call, and let's get started. Education Evolution listeners, you are the ones to ensure we create classrooms where each student is seen, heard, valued, and thriving. We need you. Let's go out and reach every student today. Leaving a rating and review for this podcast lets others know that you find it of value and gets it in the earbuds of more educational leaders like you. Thank you for listening. Signing off, I am Maureen O'Shaughnessy, your partner in boldly reimagining education.